Okay, let's unpack this. Our deep dive today is into a story that sits right at the intersection of wartime London paranoia, pre-war continental crime, and the just devastating silent burden that's forced upon refugees.
It's a really complex one.
Yeah. We're looking at excerpts that detail a brutal and really meticulously planned series of murders that happened in London in 1944. And the investigation, it demanded the combined, and I have to imagine, weary efforts of Chief Inspector Sinclair and the exceptionally insightful former Inspector John Madden.
It's a chilling narrative, and what makes it so unique, I think, is that this isn't your typical wartime crime. We're not talking about the black market or, some opportunistic smash and grab. We're
Right.
dealing with something much deeper. The sources show a killer whose his cold efficiency links a whole sequence of murders that stretch back years to occupied and even preoccupied Europe.
So our mission here is to trace this ghost of a killer.
Yeah.
Really.
Exactly. To expose his hidden identity, or I should say, his multiple identities, and to understand the profound historical reasons why the past finally caught up to two young women who were just struggling to survive in the middle of a global war.
And before we can even get into the crime itself, we have to grasp the setting, the sheer difficulty of it. We're in London, November 1944.
The context is everything.
It is. The city is defined by the blackout and that constant, just unnerving threat of German vengeance weapons.
The V-bombs.
The V-bombs and the rockets, they're demoralizing, they're unpredictable, and the environment itself becomes an accomplice in a way.
Absolutely. The environment is the killer's greatest ally. I mean, just think about the strain on the Metropolitan Police at that time.
It must have been immense.
Before the war, they had a force of around, say, 19,500 officers. By November 44, that number had just plummeted to 12,000.
Wow.
And these remaining officers were completely, totally stretched thin. They were battling a massive rise in serious crime, black market activity, looting, assaults.
All the things you'd expect.
Right. But at the same time, they were having to enforce this crushing deluge of petty offenses under the defense regulations.
And that distinction, the defense regulations, that's so key here, isn't it? It wasn't just patrolling for thieves.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It wasn't. The defense regulations covered literally everything from minor rationing breaches to blackout violations, all the administrative paperwork for aliens, general public order stuff that just tied up police resources endlessly.
So the serious crime unit is just swamped.
Chief Inspector Sinclair said the effort to focus the plainclothes branch solely on major violent crime exhausted him. His best men were constantly being pulled away to deal with all this, bureaucratic madness.
So this setting low visibility, thin resources, high anxiety, and total administrative chaos is exactly why a cold, methodical killer who relied on disappearing into the background felt he could operate with impunity.
The perfect storm.
The stage is set for a nightmare. So let's jump straight into that initial crime, which happens, of course, in the darkest hours of the blackout.
We begin our narrative with an air raid warden, a man named Bert. He's on duty on Little Russell Street. And it's a bitter night. The wind is just biting. It's getting through his coat, his jersey, his overalls.
He's trying to get through his shift.
He is. He uses the quick, flickering flame of a match to check his wristwatch, which is a small but necessary risk in the blackout. And he realizes he's close to the end of his 3-hour tour. He's tired. He's cold. He is ready to be done.
And just as he's about to pack up and head for home, he collides with someone.
Unexpectedly, yeah. A dark figure swings rapidly around the corner from Museum Street. The collision is accidental, but it's immediate. He realizes it's a young woman, maybe in her early 20s.
And she's clearly in a hurry.
She's breathless, hurrying through the gloom, wearing a heavy winter coat with a hood pulled up. Bert, being the diligent warden, he tries to reassure her. He says something mild like, "It's this blinking blackout, miss, makes a proper mess of things."
And the woman, she's clearly foreign, right? She apologizes quickly. She has this slight, hesitant accent. And it seems like she's almost grateful to have run into an authority figure.
It's a momentary lull in her anxiety. She sets down her heavy basket, which is filled with country provisions, for just a moment on the pavement, just to warm her painfully cold fingers.
So Bert moves on. He's offered that little bit of comfort, but moments later, tragedy.
He trips over something low, falls awkwardly. He scrambles to get his torch out, switches it on to see what caused him to stumble.
And the beam of light just illuminates the trauma. Lying there are a pair of legs protruding onto the pavement.
It's the young woman he just spoke to.
The same one.
The same one. She's lying still, her face is pale, the hood has been dragged clear of her head. He checks her pulse, and there's nothing. The heavy basket, that symbol of her hard-won survival, has tipped over, and its contents are just scattered on the cold, wet pavement.
The victim is identified pretty quickly as Rosa Nowak, a Polish refugee, Jewish, working as a land girl near Highfield.
Which is close to John Madden's property in Surrey. She had traveled all the way to London specifically to visit her aunt, a Mrs. Lasky, and to deliver those supplies.
And the initial police reaction, even among these hardened wartime officers, it just speaks volumes about the context, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because of the high volume of opportunistic assaults, the violence against women late at night in the blackout. The first crude assumption was that Rosa was a streetwalker.
An easy, common victim. But Chief Inspector Sinclair addresses this bias right away. He asks about her status, and his colleague confirms, almost with a kind of surprise, that she was not a prostitute then.
And that small detail just elevates the case instantly.
It does. It suggests premeditation, or at least a specific, non-random motive. It moves it beyond a spontaneous crime of opportunity that wartime London had just grown tragically used to.
And speaking of her identity, the contents of her basket, they tell such a detailed, heartbreaking story of her life as a land girl.
Oh, absolutely.
It wasn't just apples and broken eggs. We have 2 fully plucked chickens, 3 jars of homemade jam, and a crock of honey.
This is the currency of survival in rationing-era London. These items are enormously valuable. They represent a massive effort on Rosa's part. The jam, the honey, the chickens, all precious things she was sacrificing to bring to her aunt in the city.
It confirms she's someone tied to the land, someone who worked hard, and someone whose primary concern was family.
And survival. And it also hints at the profound emotional weight she was carrying. The sources confirm Rosa was a Jewish woman who had escaped Poland and later had to flee France after the German invasion. She was described as still grieving the loss of her entire family.
Which confirms the brutal reality of the wholesale massacre of Jews in occupied Europe.
She was a casualty of the war long before the killer ever found her. She was emotionally scarred. She was physically displaced. Her murder in a dark London alley is just a profound, cruel reminder that even the deepest sanctuary sometimes fails to protect those who have suffered the most.
So let's pivot to the physical evidence left behind by the killer in the immediate area. It's minimal, but it's highly significant. We have those 3 matched coat buttons and the famous matchsticks.
The buttons are an immediate source of curiosity for the investigators. They were found near Rosa's head, separate from the scattering of food, and they still had a curl of thread attached.
But the police checked, and Rosa's own coat buttons were all present and accounted for.
Done up tightly against the cold.
So if they weren't hers, they had to come from the killer or someone else involved.
Yeah.
But why were they ripped off? And why were they left behind?
It suggests they came from the killer's coat, perhaps ripped off during a prior violent encounter, or maybe even ripped off in the seconds before he struck Rosa, if she struggled briefly. But if he was wearing a coat with missing buttons, it kind of complicates the image of this smooth killer.
Right, it implies a struggle, or at least a previous moment of vulnerability, that the killer was unable to repair.
Exactly. But it's the matchsticks that truly focus the investigation. 4 charred matchsticks found right near her body. They were noted specifically for being fresh.
Which suggests someone, the killer, surely, had struggled in the wind and the darkness to strike a light just moments before or immediately after the murder.
And Detective Billy Stiles, he zeroes in on this right away. He asks Dr. Lansom, the pathologist, why would the killer need a light in the middle of a homicide?
And Billy speculates.
He speculates that the killer may have been looking for something he thought she had on her, or something he had dropped. In the absolute darkness of the blackout, that tiny flickering light would have been essential for a brief moment of orientation or searching.
Which brings us to the ultimate cause of death, revealed by Dr. Ransom. Initially, officers assumed it was a simple strangulation, something common in the blackout.
And that initial assessment was profoundly wrong. Ransom later apologizes for the haste, stating the cause of death was definitively a broken neck. He details the chilling mechanism.
How he did it.
The killer grabbed her from behind, slipped his arm around her neck, and snapped the spinal column with a swift, incredibly strong wrench.
Horrifying. But Ransom stated it didn't require special skill, just great strength and speed.
Exactly. And this is the crucial distinction. It doesn't suggest the specialized ritualistic killing you might see in some kind of serial killer, but rather a chilling, effective, almost military-grade efficiency.
It means premeditated intent to kill, executed quickly and brutally.
Ransom notes, it's hard to see what other purpose the killer could have had in mind besides killing her quickly and silently.
Okay, wait. But if the pathology suggests this brutal, sudden efficiency, isn't that more like a spontaneous blackout assault? Quick attack to subdue a victim. Why would John Madden instantly jump to this long-term continental motive based only on the speed of the kill?
That's a brilliant question because it forces us to look beyond the violence and into the motive that Madden, with his unique insight, perceives. Madden is drawn into the case right away because Rosa worked on his property in Surrey.
So it's personal for him.
It is. He felt a deep personal connection to her, seeing her not just as an employee, but as a deeply grieving casualty of war. And this emotional investment immediately made him skeptical of a random attack.
So his instinct is guiding the technical investigation.
Yes,
Right.
and he focuses on that small detail from Warden Burt's statement. Madden questions why Rosa paused to talk to the warden when she seemed to be hurrying so much. If she was simply worried about the blackout, she'd just keep moving.
Madden theorizes that Rosa wasn't necessarily frightened of a specific person, but just deeply uneasy, maybe feeling like she was being shadowed.
He suggests that running into the warden, a symbol of protection, allowed her that necessary moment of relief. She paused, had a brief chat, and used that interaction to assure herself that the footsteps she thought she heard behind her were only imaginary.
Or that the person following her had been forced by the sudden appearance of the warden to take another route.
And once she was reassured, she felt safe enough to continue alone, dropping her guard just for a few critical seconds.
And if that's true, the killer was there, hiding in the blackout, just waiting for her to move on. And when she did, he moved instantly, closed the distance, and delivered that swift, strong wrench to her neck.
Which brings us back full circle to the matchsticks. The killer, operating in haste because his target had just spoken to a witness, he struck and killed her. Then, he needed that tiny flicker of light. Was he confirming her identity? Was he looking for something she might have been carrying that would tie him back to Europe? It just reinforces this idea that this was a targeted execution, not a random act of violence. The killer didn't want attention. He wanted a specific victim eliminated, silently.
So the police now have a professional, efficient killer with possible ties to the continent who leaves almost no physical evidence except 3 strange buttons and 4 burnt matches. They need an eyewitness, but the murder happened during peak blackout.
And this is where WPC Lily Poole provides a genuinely brilliant piece of lateral thinking. She was the one who initially responded to Warden Burt's whistle. So when the standard investigation stalls, because, who sees anything in blackout, she decides to consult the people who operate habitually in the shadows. The local streetwalkers, or tarts, reasoning correctly that they are more observant than most.
That's extraordinary. Then amidst a critical wartime murder investigation, a WPC had the initiative to go and consult the city's marginalized population. That just speaks volumes about the value placed on local, street-level knowledge.
And it pays off handsomely. Days later, she spots a woman named Florence de Moulin, known as French Flory, shopping in Oxford Street, and she shows her Rosa's photo. And Flory confirms she saw Rosa shortly before the murder, specifically at the Tottenham Court Road tube station.
And Flory's account is chilling. It immediately validates Madden's theory that Rosa was being followed. She describes a man carrying a business-like briefcase who was clearly looking for Rosa, asking Flory which way the young woman went.
And when Flory hesitated, sensing danger, the man escalated immediately. He grabbed her throat in a chokehold. The sources described this horrifying threat, whispered in English right in her ear.
Answer the question or I break your bloody neck.
That phrase. It immediately links this man to the first murder, confirming he is the killer. It's the unique signature. It's the absolute smoking gun.
It connects the pathology to the person.
It does. But there's an even more critical linguistic clue that Flory provides during her interview with Madden and Inspector Cook. Flory recounts shouting French insults, une merde, at the man after he released her and left.
Right, and Madden is confused by this. He asks why she would speak French to a man who spoke English with a perfectly English accent.
Ah, the continental giveaway.
Exactly.
Flory explains that when the man first spoke to her, describing Rosa, he used the French word un capuchon to describe the hood Rosa was wearing, probably because he realized Flory didn't instantly understand the English word hood.
It was a slip.
A fleeting attempt to communicate better, but it was enough.
That's phenomenal. He had an English voice, an English manner, But the French vocabulary was so integrated into his thinking that he used it unconsciously.
It told Fleury, and by extension Madden, everything they needed to know. The man understood French perfectly. This confirmed he was an Englishman who had spent extensive, perhaps formative, time on the continent. And Fleury shouted the insults because she instinctively knew he would hear them and understand them, confirming her gut feeling that he was one to stay away from.
This is no petty thief. This is a highly capable individual with a sophisticated, layered background.
And the cost of this identification, however, is immediate and terrible. 3 days after her interview with the police, Fleury is found garroted in her Soho flat in Cable Lane. The killer moved with professional speed to eliminate the witness.
How did he get in?
The police reconstruction suggests he jimmied the street door, a simple lockpick, and then he waited until Fleury came to investigate a noise at her own flat door, and then executed her. She was found in a narrow hallway, curled up in a fetal position.
And Dr. Ransom is called back to examine the body. He confirms garroting, using a thin wire or a cord, not the manual broken neck that killed Rosa.
The method is different, but the intent is identical. As Ransom points out, he leaves no witnesses behind. He confirms it was an expert job, swift and silent, and the killer displayed incredible nerve.
What do you mean?
He executed the murder stealthily, even though another residence guest, Juanita's Yank airman, had only recently departed the building. The killer knew the risks, and he prioritized silence and lethality above all else.
So we have a killer who adapts his method broken neck for haste in the blackout, garrote for silence in an apartment. But his strategic goal never changes: witness elimination. This confirms they're dealing with a cold, professional operative, not some maniac.
And the investigation immediately ramps up. It becomes a priority yard inquiry. Billy Stiles and Joe Grace join Chief Inspector Sinclair and Madden. The profile is clear. An Englishman, continental connections, professional killer, and now he's linked to a criminal network.
Now they have to connecting to the lower echelons of crime, finding the threads he used in London. And they link him to a petty criminal named Alfie Meeks.
Alfie Meeks is a familiar figure to Madden, who remembers him from his youth in Bethnal Green. Madden even recalls Alfie's father, Jonah Meeks, a violent bully whose death found in a cistern was ruled an accident. It's a tragic detail that keeps pulling Madden's personal history into this current sprawling case.
But Alfie Meeks himself, he wasn't a killer, he was a petty criminal, a runner.
Dealing mostly in stolen goods and fraud, yeah. But he was hired by the killer for 2 specific tasks that were crucial to the London end of the operation.
Which were?
First, he was hired to find a Polish girl, which led him to Rosa. Second, and this is crucial for the killer's profit motive, he was hired to set up a meeting with Solly Silverman, a notorious jeweler and fence operating out of Holborn who specialized in sparklers.
Diamonds.
Diamonds!
In this meeting, it becomes the next explosion of violence. It confirms the killer's ruthlessness and his profit motive. Meeks, Silverman, and a third man, Benny Costa, are all killed in a back room of the White Boar pub in Wapping.
This is a triple execution designed for maximum cleanup. The chief inspector correctly hypothesizes that Meeks was used, then discarded. Silverman, the fence, was lured down to the docks by what must have been an irresistible offer involving diamond stones likely stolen in Europe and not yet registered on any British circulation lists.
Making them highly liquid and untraceable.
Exactly. Meeks had tempted Silverman with a small velvet box containing just one enticing stone.
So the killer shot 3 people to secure his profit and eliminate anyone who could trace the transaction. It just underscores his profound ruthlessness, confirming that profit and self-preservation are his core motivations.
But this whole complex web of continental murder and London crime, it needs a concrete ID beyond Marco and the man with the English accent. And this is where WPC Lily Poole once again provides the true, essential breakthrough by diving into the archives.
Sinclair had a hunch, didn't he? He had this instinct that the killer had a history abroad. He specifically instructed Poole to look through the dusty International Police Commission, or IPC, files.
Messages shared between European police forces that had been gathering dust since the war started. Sinclair was looking for jewel thieves who were also known for extreme violence.
And Poole found it. An advisory from 1937 about a triple murder in Fontainebleau, France. This single document just blew the case wide open, connecting the 1944 London killings to a 7-year history of violence.
The details of the Fontainebleau case match the killer's profile perfectly, but with a level of brutality that even surprised the seasoned London police.
What happened there?
The victims were a wealthy businessman named Lagrange, who was strangled in his study. The killer was interrupted when Lagrange's wife started screaming. The killer then shot Madame Lagrange in the stomach. But despite the screams rousing servants upstairs, the killer did not panic.
He exhibited methodical, cold control.
He calmly walked up the stairs, put a bullet in the back of Madame Lagrange's head to silence her, and then executed their 14-year-old daughter, who was trying to drag herself away after being shot in the leg.
It's that methodical execution of the child that defines this killer. It's not rage. It's calculated witness elimination taken to the absolute extreme.
It is the definition of professional, ruthless control. And this profile allowed the French Sûreté, who were contacted through newly established military channels now that Paris was liberated, to positively identify the killer. His French alias was Marco,
And they quickly link Marco to Raymond Ash.
who is confirmed to be Alfie Meeks's stepbrother.
So let's just recap that profile for a moment.
Yeah.
We are hunting Raymond Ash, who operated as Marco in France. The French police classified him as a former cheap thug in the Balkans who had evolved into a smoother article. That suggests a massive psychological change, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The cheap thug relies on brute force and chaos. The smoother article relies on planning, disguise, and eliminating traces. Ash learned that the greatest threat isn't violence, it's identification.
So he cultivated a respectable facade.
He maintained an unremarkable life. The goal was to build this protective shield of anonymity around himself, which he knew one single witness could shatter.
Which brings us squarely to part 4, tracing the direct link between Ash, the European underworld, and Rosa Nowak, the young woman who died in the blackout 4 years later. It all comes back to Paris in the frantic days of 1940.
The central figure here is Maurice Sobel, a distinguished Jewish furrier in Paris, the head of Sobel Frères. As the Germans approached in May 1940, Sobel prepared to flee. And like many wealthy Jews, he was frantically converting his substantial assets, his entire life's work, into portable, liquid wealth. Diamonds. He conducted this transaction through a diamond broker named Eiskens.
This wasn't just common theft. It was the theft of a family's only chance at survival. Those diamonds were the ultimate survival currency in occupied Europe.
They represented life or death. But Sobel also displayed this incredible humanity. Despite the immediate, overwhelming danger, he agreed to take 2 Polish refugees with him to Spain, a Polish officer named Jan Belka and an unnamed young Jewish woman.
That unnamed young woman, Madden quickly deduces, was Rosa Nowak.
Tragically, Sobel never made it out. He was killed, likely garroted by Marco, Raymond Ash, in his home shortly before he planned to leave. The diamonds were stolen. The broker, Eiskens, was also murdered later. Marco eliminating both witnesses to the diamond transaction before his own escape from the collapsing continent.
And this confirms the primary motive for Rosa's murder in London. She wasn't just a refugee. She was a witness to the original Sobel diamond murder in Paris 4 years prior.
Ash realized that if he was ever arrested in England for anything, a small crime, a passport issue, and Rosa was found, she could identify him as Marco. And that identification would send him to the guillotine for the Sobel murder. Rosa was the single fragile thread connecting his respectable 1944 London identity back to his old, violently criminal past.
But her silence, that's difficult to reconcile with the danger. She made it safely to England. Why didn't she report the murder then when she was safe?
And this is perhaps the most painful insight into the refugee experience in wartime England. Rosa was an alien. She was here on sufferance. She had a profound, inescapable sense of insecurity, and her companion, Jan Belka, who later enlisted and was killed in action, had counseled her strongly to stay silent.
Why?
They reasoned that reporting the murder, especially one involving high-value diamonds and a known international killer, would inevitably entangle them in an inquiry which might well turn out badly for them, given their highly sensitive status as non-citizens relying on the goodwill of the British government.
So they were prioritizing survival over justice.
Absolutely. Rosa spent 4 years convincing herself that what she saw in Paris was a fantasy, a product of her fear, especially given the sheer unlikelihood of encountering the killer again in England. Her silence and her self-doubt are tragic, but they're utterly rational under the circumstances.
So Ash killed her because she could identify him, and he killed Flory because Flory had identified him. His pattern remains fixed. Eliminate all who can link him to his crimes. But the investigation quickly shifts again because they realize Ash wasn't looking for Rosa Nowak at the time of her death. He was looking for someone else.
Exactly. The police, digging into the activities of Quill, the detective Ash had hired and later murdered in Wapping, they confirm Ash was still actively searching for a Polish girl living in the country, a girl who wasn't Rosa.
Which leads Madden to the second refugee, Eva Belka.
Jan Belka's wife or companion, who is now living in Liphook, Surrey, working for a woman named Mary Spencer at a house called The Grange.
Eva is the final, ultimate witness to the Sobel murder, and the last person who can confirm Ash's identity is Marco. But how did Ash even know Rosa or Eva were in England?
That crucial detail emerges from a completely unexpected source. A young pilot officer named Paul Tyson, who had shared a train compartment with Rosa and Eva Belka on the very day Rosa was murdered.
And Tyson reveals a subtle but critical detail about their journey from Surrey to London.
He does. He says Rosa and Eva were speaking nonstop in Polish, chattering away as though there was just too much to say. Then suddenly they stopped talking in Polish. They had reached a station, probably Guildford or Waterloo.
And Tyson looked up, curious about the abrupt silence.
He did, and he saw Rosa looking absolutely stunned, or surprised anyway. The women resumed chatting immediately, but in a much more subdued, concerned tone, whispering low in Polish.
The implication is just stunning. Rosa recognized Ash on the train platform or maybe in the next carriage. Her stunned silence wasn't fear of a potential threat. It was sudden, horrific recognition of an established, deadly threat.
She must have told Eva in those low Polish whispers that her fantasy wasn't a fantasy at all, that the killer from Paris was here in England and perhaps looking for them. This revelation turns the investigation into a frantic Christmas-time race against time.
Madden now knows Eva Belka is the killer's ultimate final target, and Ash has already gone from London. They confirm his name on a fire watcher's list in Wandsworth, Raymond Ash, and discover he abandoned his London flat right after Rosa's murder, leaving a bogus story about moving to Manchester for a job.
And what makes him particularly dangerous now is his new disguise, purchased with the money from the Wapping execution. Ash had acquired a military uniform. His landlady spotted him leaving his Lambeth lodgings as an officer, wearing a greatcoat and cap.
In wartime Britain, a uniform is the ultimate camouflage.
It allows free movement, it confers a degree of automatic trust, and it offers wartime travel privileges. The police now have to approach him as a highly trained killer who is invisible in plain sight. They are authorized to shoot if he makes any move for a weapon.
The stakes are astronomical.
Yeah.
On Christmas Eve, Madden takes it upon himself to drive down to the Grange in Liphook, knowing Eva Belka is the only one left. He speaks to Eva, who confirms the full, agonizing story of Sobel's murder and her husband's insistence on silence.
Madden is convinced Ash is coming. He tries to arrange protection, calling the Liphook Bobby, but it's just not enough. The armed Metropolitan Police car carrying Styles and Grace, the cavalry, is delayed.
Stuck in the snow.
Stuck deep in a ditch on the way, buried by the unseasonal snow.
So the tension is just unbearable. The scene is set for the final confrontation. Madden is alone in this sprawling, dark Grange house with Mary Spencer and Eva Belka. It's the blackout, and the exterior is covered in heavy, sound-dampening snow.
And Ash arrives, using the snow and the blackout to cover his approach perfectly. He is quiet, professional, and entirely focused.
How does Madden know he's there?
Madden, ever alert, realizes the killer is already inside the house after noticing a small, dark pool of water shimmering faintly on the stone-flagged hall floor near the stairs.
The melted snow.
Melted snow dripping from boots that shouldn't be there. And Madden, a former police officer stripped of his weapon and badge, is unarmed and utterly exposed.
And the attack is instantaneous. Ash surprises Madden in the passage, quickly and silently, just as he did Fleury Desmoulins.
He immediately employs the Garrett, the same deadly weapon used on Fleury. The description of the struggle is visceral. Madden, gasping desperately for air, feels the wire tighten like a band of fire around his throat. He fights wildly, blindly, driven only by the primal need to break the killer's hold.
And in a moment of sheer desperate improvisation, Madden's eyes scan the living room he's staggering into, and he spots a bizarre decorative artifact above the mantelpiece.
The most improbable weapon. A collection of items brought back from some colonial posting, a Zulu oxhide shield crossed with an assegai, a short stabbing spear.
He doesn't think, he just reacts.
He doesn't. In a desperate surge, he manages to drive the razor-sharp tip of the assegai directly into Ash's instep, piercing his foot.
Ash cries out in pain, a sharp, uncontrolled sound that momentarily loosens the Garrett's deadly grip. Madden throws himself backwards, sending Ash crashing violently into a nearby table, giving him a fraction of a second to scramble for his life toward the kitchen.
And just as Madden is struggling for breath and safety, Bess Brickstock, having returned and hearing the terrible commotion, charges into the passage to help.
Her bravery is just immense and immediate.
But Ash, recovering quickly despite the wound, draws a gun and fires twice through the kitchen door. The second shot wounds Bess in the temple, causing her to stumble back into the iron range with a terrible clang. And this sudden, deafening explosion of violence is what finally brings the delayed help onto the scene.
Inspector Stiles and Sergeant Grace.
Having finally been pulled out of the snowy ditch by a cart horse, they hear the unmistakable sound of gunfire. They converge instantly on the Grange. Stiles and Grace arrive at the kitchen doorway, guns drawn, and shoot Raymond Ash dead as he tries to flee or continue the assault. It's a necessary, brutal end to a man whose entire life was defined by the elimination of witnesses.
In the terrifying aftermath, Madden survives, but his throat is severely damaged, leaving him with a ragged, hoarse rasp. He was saved by blind chance, the presence of that bizarre colonial weapon, and the selfless courage of his friends.
Bess Brigstock is seriously wounded, but thankfully she recovers. Eva Belka is taken into protective custody by the police, catatonic with shock after watching her pursuer finally be neutralized. And Joe Grace, often seen as the rougher officer, shows this moment of a profound shared empathy. He comforts the shocked Eva and just notes that the killer was dirt, no better than scum. The immediate threats are gone.
So what does this extraordinary deep dive confirm about Raymond Ash in the investigation?
It confirms the staggering complexity of a case that required detectives to look backwards 7 years and across 3 countries. The Fontainebleau murders in 1937, the Sobel murder in Paris in 1940, and the string of executions in London in 1944.
And after his death, they find his safe deposit box.
They do, at a Cannon Street bank, which he held under the alias Charles Porter. And inside that box is the definitive evidence. The Sobel diamonds, the money stolen from Silverman and Wapping, and the highly detailed false papers, including a seemingly genuine American passport.
This reveals his ultimate plan.
Exactly. He was planning to use this clean identity. Charles Porter, U.S. citizen likely acquired early in the war through his black market connections, to disappear entirely once hostilities ended. He was a survivor, completely detached from human connection, meticulously preparing for a new life.
All those years living quietly in Amsterdam before the war, cultivating that smoother article facade. It shows his capacity for long-term planning.
And patience, but ultimately his inability to tolerate the existence of any witness, no matter how distant in time or geography, was his undoing.
It's a story of profound personal cost, but also of incredible resilience. Bess Brigstock, once she's recovered from her severe wound, she plans to work with the Red Cross, helping refugees and displaced persons.
Which is a profoundly fitting response to the very circumstances that had defined the lives of Rosa and Eva.
And for the investigators, the relentless pressures of the war years are drawing to a close. Chief Inspector Sinclair, exhausted but satisfied, formally accepts his resignation shortly after the case wraps up. He had originally planned to retire far away in Scotland.
But the experience of sharing this traumatic, sprawling case with Madden changed him. He has a change of heart, finds that Scotland seems too distant now. He decides to settle instead near Madden in Surrey.
So this massive international mystery, defined by the brutality of the Continental War filtering into a shadowy London, marks the end of Sinclair's long and distinguished police career.
It's an ending that reminds us that even when the immediate violence stops, the human connections, the professional and personal friendships forged under such extreme pressure, are what ultimately sustain the investigators and the survivors.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? This whole tragic 7-year sequence, the triple murders, the diamond theft, the global sweep of violence, it all began with a simple, agonizing choice made by Rosa Nowak 4 years earlier in Paris. The human decision to prioritize safety over justice, to save herself and flee instead of staying behind to report a murder that occurred during an imminent invasion.
And that decision was rational. Arguably, it was the only moral decision, given the impending German occupation and her identity as a Jewish woman facing imminent extermination. But it carried a 4-year delayed fuse, costing her and Flory their lives. And it raises a truly important, provocative question for us all. In a time of war and existential threat, when survival is the only morality you can cling to, is it truly possible to outrun the consequences of what you witness? Or does the truth inevitably find its way across borders and years, waiting for the precise moment you finally stop running?
That's a powerful note to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a corner of wartime history that's often overlooked. See you next time.